Hello, everyone. Good morning. We will start in a couple of minutes just to let everybody come in, and we will begin. All right, I have about 10:02. I guess we can get started now. So, good morning, and thank you for attending the Arts in the Libraries virtual festival. Today's session is Food, Shelter, Water, an arts-based research investigation. As a reminder, you can submit questions throughout the session, which we will be answering at the end of the presentation, and we will get to as many as time permits. Dr. Natalia Pilato is an assistant professor in art education and the director of the art education program at ODU. Her research interests focus on socially engaged, community-based artistic practice in action. Dr. Pilato is joined by her students, Amber Pierce, an ODU art education and fine arts major, and by Annalise Weimer, a senior theater major at ODU, who hopes to open a social justice-centered theater company after graduation. This presentation highlights 3 artistic research projects created by Dr. Pilato's students enrolled in Arts 495 Arts for Social Justice, a special topics studio art class offered in the fall of 2021, led by Dr. Natalia Pilato. Each student researched using books, scholarly articles, and news media from the Hofheimer Art Library on their topics. Students were then split into 3 groups and collaborated to create large collage art pieces to represent their research findings, which were displayed in Perry Library and the Barry Arts Building Rotunda. It is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Natalia Pilato, Amber Pierce, and Annalise Weimer.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to share my screen with you all so that you guys can participate in our PowerPoint. Thank you for having us. Are you seeing the PowerPoint? Are you all seeing this PowerPoint? Do I have a thumbs up? Yes. Okay, thank you. So today we're here to present to you on a research project that my students did in a class. And since we were already introduced, I'm just going to go right into it and launch into it. And basically, the students spent the semester doing arts-based research. And before we continue, I just kind of want to explain a little bit what arts-based research actually is. And I'm sorry that the thing is taking a minute to load here. Oh, here we go. So, you know, as artists, people sometimes think that we just come up with these amazing creative ideas and we just throw them all into our works, and that, you know, somehow our creative spirit does this without any sort of background. And we are researchers as well. And arts-based research is a term that came out quite some time ago to discuss how artists research and to talk about the fact that, you know, some people have a paper in the end when they do research, or they have an article, but artists often produce an art piece that represents the research that they do. And that art piece is a product or an artifact of their research. So Patricia Levy talks a lot about arts-based research, and she talks about how it provides artists with this opportunity to bridge their artist self along with their research and, you know, approach research in creative ways. And then there, through arts-based research, a group of women out of Canada came together, and they came up with this term called artography. And basically it's artist, researcher, teacher. And that is sort of how I run my own practice and my own classes, and the way I teach is I see myself as all these areas intersecting. So I see myself as an artist, I see myself as a researcher, and I see myself as a teacher. And I combine all those together, and they have sort of equal weight. So not one outweighs the other. So that when you're working in this way, you think of how we're going to combine all these things. And for this particular group of women often talk about the fact that this is sort of an embodied living experience, and that these ideas in practice are emergent, and the theorizing happens through this inquiry of creating in these spaces, in the teaching and the learning, and that we have to resist conclusions, and we understand that it's generative and reflective, the nature of inquiry. And a lot of times when we're thinking about research, we're trying to find an answer. But for artists, we're often making mistakes along the way to figure out the answer, constantly reflecting, going back and changing things, working on a series of work. So it doesn't end with the solution for us. And we just sort of it keeps generating, it keeps emerging. And this is just sort of how we do our practice. So I wanted to sort of just go into that for a moment before we sort of talk about doing an arts-based research project, so that when we go through this, you can understand that the product of our research is an art piece, and that you can see that that's how we're showing our research. I am going to just come back to this, and I'm going to have Anna talk for a minute, because before we even started this project, I was having the students do arts-based research and having them do research projects, and we were using Blackboard as our platform to do that. Let's see, it's not escaping my PowerPoint. Oh, there we go. I'm so sorry. Just give me 1 second to show you this. And then I'll have Annalise talk a little bit. So the way I ran the class is that every week we would look at a different art topic, and we would pick. So this one is the particular one this week is collage. So before we did our collage project, the students had to find an artist that worked with their topic, and they had to discuss the artist and then give some more resources about the topic as well. So Annalise is going to sort of talk about that a little bit and what we did leading up to the course. And we did it with everything: photography, painting. So every week was a different topic. Every week the students had to log on and fill out this discussion board and also talk with their friends. Anna, can you talk with us a little bit about that? I'm going to bring it to yours. Here we are with Anna's. You all can see that, correct? Okay.
Absolutely. And good morning, everybody. Excuse me. Coming into this class from the theater major area, I really didn't know what to expect. And so when we started doing art-based research, and particularly when we got into the collage portion of this segment, I found this really interesting piece, and I couldn't find a proper artist statement by the artist, even though I was able to find her website and her discussing the piece, but never really giving a full definition of what it was supposed to mean. I loosely based it off of what she was trying to describe when talking about her art, and I started to realize that I was seeing, her interpretation of, propaganda and whatnot. But when we started doing the research, I got really invested into certain artists that I particularly am still sticking with, Maggie Rose was one of them. There was I was another individual who is based out of China, and he did a immigrant-based art protest piece that was based actually in Germany and talked about the immigration issue that's happening in Greece right now. Excuse me. But when we started doing the collage piece in general, I found myself being really interested by the art form and by the message that could be portrayed using collage. Specifically, I kept going back to the Dada collage pieces. And now I'm going to segue back over to Dr. Pilata. Thank you.
You're muted, Dr. Pilato.
You're muted.
Sorry. So basically the students had this conversation every week, and in the end we have 130 pieces of conversation with this discussion board. So every week, you know, I had 10 or 11 students. Every student had to post not only a piece of artwork, but they had to post, as you can see on Amber's here, they had to post other links to talk about this. So, you know, Amber's talking about sex education and gender equality, and then she's giving us some other videos and other things to sort of address those issues. So not only did they have to pick an artist, but then they had to find links and other research topics to sort of talk about the topic as well. So the artist and the topic got covered with each weekly post. And then they sort of replied to each other, and they talked about some of the things that they felt were important. And it was really rich, and their conversations were really deep. And then when they came together in class, they were able to extend the conversations because we would do this before we would meet on the topic, which is a really great practice for teachers, because then you're not sort of waiting for them to respond. They have to do the homework first, and then the conversation has already been started, and you can just sort of continue the conversation. I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint now. I just wanted to sort of show you all what that looked like. You can see the PowerPoint, correct? And here it is. Yes? PowerPoint? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about the research a little bit. And so basically for this particular project, we did several projects all semester. This one, the students were tasked on their own first. So before we worked collaboratively, they all had to do some research. And we met with Gay in the library and her colleague, Laura, and they sort of talked to us about how to do research in the library and how to use the databases and things. And so they gave, and they had already some links for my students that they could find some of the information, because I had shared this with Gay already. And they all had to check out one book. So this was the social justice themester already. So the Hofheimer Library had a beautiful display on books that they had already chosen about social justice, which definitely made my students project a little bit easier, because they were a lot of the books that they used were on display. And they had to check out one book about a visual artist who addresses their topic, one of the 3 topics. I split them into 3 groups. And then they also had to check out an additional book that actually didn't just address the artist, but address the topic, or how it talked about the topic, or pick a few more artists that dealt with the topic, whether it be food, shelter, or water. And then they also had to find one peer-reviewed article to use as it relates to their topic. And they had to find a newspaper article as well. And they had to write an annotated bibliography about all their research. So that was, you know, a week in the class, just sort of doing research. They all had to do this sort of research. And then from there, it's not letting me move on. There we go. So from there, once they collected all those things, they had to create a PDF that had images and text, at least 10 images and at least 10 quotes from their reading. Which can include, you can see newspaper headlines, quotes from the artist, images of the artist, and then they had to find a way to cite them and size them so that they could use them in their collage boards. And they needed to create some kind of system so that when we displayed the works, people would know where the information comes from. So they're not just appropriating information, and they're providing the viewer with a way to understand what the things in the pieces came from and where they came from. And then once they gathered all their sources, I asked them to mind map all their research and then sketch out their idea for their board. So everyone got a 4x8 piece of plywood, every group. So there was 3 boards, and they individually had to decide how did they want to show their research on the board. So that's sort of how they got to that point. And then from there, this was their requirements for the work of art. So the requirements were that they had to use primer, they had to have a cutout section, they had to paint the background. And so this is just sort of the art part of what they needed to do. They had to have a 3D element, and they also had to have something that came off the board, and they needed a takeaway for visitors. So they got, after they made their own, they got it together and they collaborated with each other, 3 people in a group, and they reviewed their sketches together. And then they decided to make another, each one of them made another sketch now that they had all the research together for what the piece could look like with each other's sketches. And then they did that. They rolled out a large sheet of paper. They started to cut, figured out which shape they wanted for their paper, and they worked together to come up with their final piece. So they all brought their research into the final piece. So you have 3 different bits of research in one final piece that they had to collaborate to make together. And then they had to cut out all their pieces and make their 3D elements. And this is, I'm going to have Amber talk to you about the process, because I have a bunch of images of them working on the project. So they're gonna talk about that. So they had to, draw their shape. They had to have this 3D element. We worked with our lab tech to help cut some of these things out of the 3D elements and build them on stands so that they could be seen by the public. And now I'm gonna let Amber take it away with the process of making these pieces with her group, so she can sort of talk about collaboration. Collaboration isn't always easy, so there's ways to make it a little bit more seamless when you're working with students. Take it away, Amber.
Hello, everyone. So I think what really got the ball rolling was that myself and my 2 other classmates that I worked with, we all did our own individual research, as Dr. Pilato has said. So we showed up to the group with something that we felt personal about. And that really helped. We all kind of discussed what we had found. And then those conversations started to generate, well, how can we make all of our research come together? And with our project in particular, we had food, and that topic is just so huge and so global. So a lot of our initial ideas really did tie in with people on a micro scale, and then on a macro scale, the environment, the whole world. It's not just something that affects humans. So that led to us finalizing that we wanted to represent this topic with a globe, because it is something that affects the entire world. And it was good for myself, because I had another artist who was a painter, and I was more so sculptural, and then we had a communications major, so we all had different perspectives, and we all kind of showed up to the group willing to compromise, but also we all really wanted to also speak our piece and say what things were really important for us to have. So we did a couple of different conversations. We had a lot of different ideas, and we tried to pick out the elements in all of our ideas that kept reoccurring, or we saw a connection. So the hands, the globe, figuring out where we wanted to put our cutout spaces. And then also we really did want to include the ideas of our comm major. We didn't want to just be the artist like taking over. So we listened a lot to like the symbolism that he saw, which was the peace sign. And I'll talk more about that later, so we can go on. And so this is kind of what the process looked like. We brought all of our researched collages, because we all made our own individual collages where we sourced our own images, and we wrote a statement about just the initial collages that we made. And as we were talking, we realized we kind of have 2 themes going on here. We have how food disparities or overconsumption or overproduction of food has an effect on humans. There's starvation, there's obesity, there's just so much. So in the world, we drew out a map of the world, and inside the world are all the pictures that have to do with humanity or humankind. And then within the water, all of the pictures have to do with how our current agriculture and just landfills and just the way that we kind of treat food and our earth are within the water. So the impact that it has on nature and land. So we divided our pictures that way to create some kind of order and a sort of key. And then we all individually just kind of went at it and placed pictures where we thought. We really worked well together in the sense that we understood that we all had a common goal. And I don't think we took things too harshly if one of us was like, I don't think that goes here. I'm gonna stick it over there. We were all okay with that. And so that really helped. And we just kind of zoned out and got in the flow, which was really nice when you have all the ideas and the research and the conversation at the forefront, because then after that, you can kind of just get focused on how do I make this visually. And then we can go to the next slide. And here we are continuing to just fill up the space. And we really wanted to cover the whole surface. So it did take a lot of concentrating and a lot of turning the images or cutting out the images. And I think that that's something that myself and Maya, having that artistic background, we're able to really communicate. You need to have some kind of thought behind where you're placing pictures, even though it is a collage. And you can go to the next slide. And so once we got the entire surface covered with pictures, we went back on top to define the shapes. So we did washes of watercolor over the land and the water to really make them appear overall green or blue. And there's also some texture in there made with tissue paper because we really wanted to unify the whole thing. And that can be something that's a little difficult when you have a collage because you have all these different surfaces and colors. So adding more material on top kind of solidified it so that our message can come through. And you can go to the next slide. So this is just a close-up of more details. On the left side, you can see that we added seeds, which were our communication major's suggestion, which I thought was really neat. It was nice to have those different perspectives. And he thought a great takeaway would be to kind of give the power of producing food naturally to those who may either need food or want to eat differently or just interact with the earth in a healthy way to produce food. And then on the right, there's a close-up of the water collage, which is Annalise's project.
Yeah, and I'm going to have Annalise talk about that next. And I did want to say that they had this yin yang idea going on, and that's where you see the two circles. And so that putting those seeds on, when you see the final piece at the end, you'll see how it sort of defined the yin yang as well, because they made it go in the shape of the, you have to have the dark and the light. And I think our communication major was really into that idea of the yin and the yang, just that philosophy behind it as well. Go ahead, Anna. We're gonna move on to your piece and have Anna talk about their piece. So, the piece that has to do with water.
Yeah, our topic was water, and when doing research, all three of us came to different aspects of water pollution research. Mine was about the struggle with the Dakota pipeline. Karan, one of our other members, I believe theirs was how water pollution has an effect on the wildlife, specifically the turtles. And then our other member, I'm blanking on her name. I feel so bad for that. Hers was about the pollution that was happening over in China with their, with their oil spills and how they were how they were just dumping all of this pollution into their water systems. So this is us going through, particularly me, going through and I'm cutting images out of the collage, or out of cutting images out for the collage. We already have our background painted, a very beautiful. I love the way that she did this. That a very beautiful water texture and a very beautiful watercolor as well. We all came together and we decided that we wanted to include all aspects of our research. So we have the turtle, and there's, and you can see that there's facts about all the different points of our research, including the 600-pound stranded sea turtle, the indigenous activists, the people should still clear of Steamboat Creek in Norfolk, tying it back here because we all know that Norfolk is a very big trading hub. If you don't know, there's a giant shipyard right there. So we wanted to go back and just kind of do that. When we started putting it all together, we had this huge turtle that was a big cutout. We also included this big piece of rusted pipeline that we found through the junkyard. Thanks to Dr. Pilato. Again, thank you so much. Then we feel like that would tie it all back together as well for our research. Moving on to the next slide, I believe there's another photo of it. Oh, no, there's just that one. But in the end, when all of it came together, as well as getting critique from Lonnie Graham when he did come to visit, our work was done really, really well. I think that we did a phenomenal job. There are portions of it where we kind of looked at and we said, well, we can go back and, do something with that if we had the opportunity. But I feel like that what we had was actually pretty groundbreaking and actually quite interesting for people to see. So I'm going to go on ahead and segue over to the shelter portion of today's talk.
So yes, the other student who was going to join us today to talk about this wasn't able to, so I'm just going to sort of fill in. So we also had shelter, so it was food, water, shelter. Again, they worked in groups of 3, and they did a bunch of research on what they wanted to include in shelter. And this group had a lot of different ideas. So their collaboration was coming together in a different way, where it was a little bit more tricky to highlight everything that they wanted to do. And they started with this idea of doing this house, and then they had this idea that they were going to do a building, and then they wanted to do a cityscape. And so they changed their ideas a lot and came up with something really amazing in the end. And so this is just them sort of cutting out their images for their piece. And this is some of the stuff that was in the piece itself. So when I show you the final piece, you'll see how this was sort of incorporated. And so they had laid it down. And then I remember having the conversation where now you have it laid down. One of the requirements was once they lay everything down, they had to do some stuff on top of it. So then they decided that they were going to draw these arrows and make all these quotes and sort of just write directly on the board, which really elevated the board that they had decided to, make these highlighted points. So when you see it, your eyes sort of roll through it. Again, Anna made a comment about how Lonnie Graham came and talked to us about it. Lonnie Graham was a visiting artist. He's a social activist. We brought him in for the themester, and he gave a talk to my students. And then he came afterwards, and he's a renowned international photographer and activist. He came and talked to my students about their pieces. And I really feel like it was really inspiring for them because he was very impressed with their work, and they were very excited about what they did. They were very proud of their work. It was a lot of work. My classes are very hard. I make the students work really hard, and they had put a lot into it, and they were tired, and it was due at a certain time. And then he came in and said, well, this is good, but maybe you need to, and he gave some suggestions too. So not only did I tell them they needed to elevate the work in certain ways, then he came in and he said he gave them some more points, and then they came back in and did more work when he left with the pointers that they gave. So they already felt like they were done. And then this artist comes in and says, well, this could help as well. And then they were, since he is, they just saw him speak and he's incredibly inspiring. I think they were all inspired to even push themselves further in the project with his input, which was amazing to all of us, I think, to have him there talking to us, someone who does this work. And this is the piece, right here of the one that was for housing when it was in the library. And you can see that all of them had to have a takeaway. So how they decided to do their takeaway was to make this sort of cardboard housing here at the bottom and give give people who came that they could take a little piece of cardboard that would have resources on it. So each one, Amber's had the little, the seeds was their takeaway, and Anna, they made a couple zines that they put inside of their pipe that was a takeaway. So every project had a takeaway for visitors to see when they were doing it. And I'm gonna transition over to Amber again, and the students all had to write artist statements. We created a QR code so people seeing it could go onto the QR code and come into a web page. And Amber created this sort of website for us. It wasn't, we have a website too, but it was just a resource site for this particular project, and so that you could find out about what the students were thinking about and also get some resources as well through the QR code. So I'm just gonna go to the next slide, and I'm gonna have Amber read us the artist statement for this piece and the artist statement they made for the next piece as well. So here's the final piece for the housing, the food, the shelter piece.
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and read their artist statement for shelter. The issue of homelessness has become more and more prevalent in today's society. There are more homeless individuals living on the streets without even their most basic needs being met than ever before. Yet, they are often the most ignored, misunderstood, and forgotten population. When people come face to face with the displaced, they tend to avert their eyes in an effort to ignore the issue standing right in front of them. It is time to look head on at the issues plaguing our society and be active in helping solve them. Look at the issues of gentrification and how this is leading to an increase in homelessness, even in our own communities. Look at the extreme difference in the wealth gap between the elite and the displaced. Look and be the change.
And you can see it here as well in our rotunda, which I will show you a final picture of this, and it's standing on alone. And on this particular piece, they used, you can't really tell here, but they used gold like paint at the top and gold glitter. So all the top is like what glitters is gold was their idea, and that there's these people at the top and they're sort of, you know, looking down on the rest, and they have sort of this power, but they're very they exploit people. And so they kind of had this whole thing going on. And then I'm gonna go to Annalise's piece, and she's gonna read you her artist statement for their piece. And you can see the pipe she was talking about here and the pipes at the bottom.
The goal of our board is to bring attention to the many ways water is affected by pollution and to make those unaware that there are more ways to contaminate and pollute water than just by littering. There are three main issues that were chosen to be added in this project. The first was the Dakota pipeline and the risk and issues that come along with it. The pipeline adds more potential risks to have oil spills and leaks from the pipe go into water sources that people rely on, particularly Native Americans. The second issue in the effects that water pollution has on marine life, turtles to be exact. Turtles often fall victim to microplastics and other discarded materials that are improperly disposed of, and often mistake them for food, which leads to choking or other issues. Lastly, the issue of industrial pollution from factories and businesses that discard their waste into water sources. Chemical production is heavy in the industrial world, and when industrial plants are built, they are usually located alongside bodies of water, which makes dumping their pollution into them more easier. Unfortunately, they do not think about the long-term effects that dumping has and who will affect. The big question is, how can we decrease or even stop and try to resolve these issues within the foreseen future? This board is meant to display how all these things can affect the quality of our water, which is an essential necessity to the world. The world's oceans and bodies of water are constantly being polluted, and we as humans should be more aware of the impact that the decisions we have made. For instance, we could do things like use biodegradable goods instead of plastics, explore new ways to dispose of chemicals properly, and create a more efficient and safe way for the transporting of oil through the country.
Thank you, Anna. And then we have this just a little up close because I wanted you all to see how they created this sort of oil spill as well along their piece. And then you can see the piece in the rotunda at our university where we had a final show for the whole class. So we had a bunch of work in there. And then we're gonna have Amber is gonna read her artist statement for this piece.
Food. Food is a basic necessity required of all humans for life on Earth, yet hunger and malnutrition are on the rise. Due to many reasons, this basic necessity is often difficult to acquire. Within our individual research, we found that the reasons for this are due to a dizzying number of factors. There are many contradicting problems. There are both food shortages and overproduction of food deserts, and massive food consumption and waste. While some people have nothing, single countries produce enough food to share even beyond their own borders. In our artwork, we look at glaring issues concerning food, as well as what people and artists have done to combat this issue. Our research is visually divided. Within the water of the globe, we represent the effects our eating habits have on the environment. Our world has been forever changed by mankind's agricultural habits, including overcultivation of land and deterioration of environments. In the continents of the globe, there are images, words, and headlines that reflect the way in which food disparities exist amongst a group of people and why and what is being done about it. Factors such as racism, capitalism, and climate change affect the issue of food. These issues fuel the chaos of the struggle to address and combat those things. The chaos in our artwork is contrasted by the overarching shape of our collage, a yin and yang symbol which represents peace and balance. In order to strive towards balance, we must address the issue of food, and we must take a critical and active role in combating this issue for those who lack.
Thank you, Amber. And so I'm just going to show you the piece a little bit up close in our rotunda. Again, we had a sort of show with a bunch of our work at the end of the social art for social justice class. The students did yarn bombing and altered books, and they stitched, their first project was to stitch on masks. And you can see some of that work here in our final show in the rotunda with the students' work. So I want to just, we're going to give you guys some time for questions. This was the poster they made. Another thing that happened, and I think I see Laura, I think I could see she was here. We had a student, a graphic design student, who helped us create a website for our resources. So this is the website, and I'm just going to show you guys that really quick, that we created something that everyone else could use, because we felt like we did all this work, and why not share it with the rest of the community? It's still kind of a work in process. And since I'm teaching a murals for social justice class, and we're going to be looking at murals and how murals affect how people use murals to address certain topics in the fall semester, we can just keep adding to this. So it's something that we wanted to build so other people could say, all right, what are they doing in painting? What are they doing with this idea about food? What are artists doing in these areas? So I just wanted to show you guys that really quick, and then I'll give you all a chance to answer some questions and ask some questions. Let me just get in here. Excuse me for 1 second. Just want to show the. So we had the website that just brought to the food, shelter, water, which is in our art education webpage, so that people, when they click the QR code, could read the artist statement that they just read. And then we provided resources there as well. So when you went to the library and you clicked on that QR code, you could find out all this information. There's an article from the pilot. There's some other things with data, so that if people wanted to know more, they could. And then for our Art for Social Justice webpage, I think you guys can see this, correct? So this is our Art for Social Justice webpage. So the graphic designer worked with us. She was very excited about this sort of idea of creating this resource page. And she came up with this graphic here. And the graphic kind of came by this idea that we make the road for walking, and that we have to start on our path. And if we don't start, then we'll never get anywhere. So she had this idea, like, together we walk together, and these were like sort of all the colors of humanity. And she was going to make this sort of thing like, let's walk together. And she wanted to create the page like it was a journey. so that when you click on the page, you could find out this information like you're going on a journey, and design this sort of database for us. So, you know, she did this thing where she did the art by topic, and you could browse by topic, and she pulled the stuff from what we did on our discussion board. So we already had all the information on the discussion board. So she was able to, you know, go in here, and you can kind of click on any of these things, and, you know, you click on, you know, gender equality, and she does, and something like I said, we're still, you know, sort of in the process of doing some of these things. And if you click on the art medium and you went to, you know, maybe we click on painting, and then, you know, you have these things, and then you can click, these are the artists that the students investigated. So then you can click on the artist, and then from there, there's a description that the students wrote about the artist, and then provided some feedback about how they felt about what they studied. So, you know, everyone has a media, every media has different topics in it. You click on the topics, there's different artists in here, and then you can click on those artists, and then you can read about what the students found out about the artists, and then their sort of assessment of the work on each one of them. Then we started to add some resources. We're still kind of, you know, doing some work with this, and put on some resources that we found that we thought would be really useful for others too, when it came to these ideas of art for social justice. And that was just sort of like the last assignment I had in class was like, let's fill up the resource page and add some more things to it that we haven't talked about already. We had a lot of different topics. We covered a lot of ground with this particular project. And so we're still sort of building that resource site, but it is there, it's there. One of our students, Karan, who also works for the libraries, helped us a lot with this as well. And we just keep, you know, we're gonna keep trying to build and add things to this resource site. And I think that's what we got for you. And now we can have you guys ask some questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pilato, Amber, and Annalise. That was a wonderful presentation, and there is so much breadth as well as depth in everything that you have pulled together. One question that has come is for all three of you. What was the most challenging part of the process?
I'm going to let Amber start with that one.
Definitely collaborating. I think most people feel that way about any project, but I think because we had so many opportunities to have conversations with each other, the more you talk and communicate, the better collaboration becomes. And you become more willing to let other people's ideas, you know, become part of the project, whether you really love them or not, as long as, you know, I think there's concentration within the group about the big things that need to happen. And you're all willing to kind of critique each other, but also if one of your partners says, hey, I want to put glitter here, you kind of have to just, okay, sure, we'll add a little glitter there, you know? So I think it really just comes down to communicating, but it was a great opportunity to learn how to do that. And I feel like moving forward, I'd be able to collaborate with anyone at this point because we had so much collaboration in this class.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Annalise. Go ahead, Annalise. Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. I would definitely say communication and collaboration, definitely. From working in the theater, I'm used to working and collabing with different people, actors, tech people, directors, producers, all that stuff. But when it came down to working with a collage project like this was a whole new world for me. So the partners that I had were fantastic. Karan was amazing. So everybody did a wonderful job, but I feel like that communication and collaboration were challenging for me because we had stuff outside of class. We had other classes to work on and all that. And having this huge project, which took a lot of time and a lot of effort, was really challenging as well. So yeah, collaborating and communication.
And as the instructor, I would say, I had opened this class up to other than art majors. And so again, we had theater majors, communication majors, and working on doing studio work takes a certain effort and concentration. And people who are studio artists understand that when you have a 3-hour studio class, that is like time to just put into creating. But if you're not used to creating in that way, then the other students, it's like, where do you start? Where do you begin? How do you even, get there? And I definitely raised the bar of my expectations. And so I feel like I had to really push the students to show up with their pieces, to show up with their ideas and I was constantly like, well, you need to print out, we need to have 10 things printed. That was the assignment. And they were like, well, why 10 things? Because we're doing a collage. The more imagery, the better, And so I was constantly having to just like push them. And I feel like they were definitely like, oh my gosh, Dr. Pilato wants so much, which is what I usually do want. But then in the end, when I do these types of projects, I always feel like there's a lot of pride and they then get it. Like after it's all done, it's like, wow, we worked so hard, but look at what we accomplished. And if I don't do that pushing, then, we don't usually get there. And I also feel like when I push, they resent me a little bit too, because it's like, I'm asking so much. So then it's like, God, she wants us to do all of this. And so they're a little bit mad. They feel like it's too hard. And then in the end, it's sort of like this whole cycle that goes through of in the end, them like accomplishing something and realizing like in order to be an artist, it is a lot of work. Being an artist is to create an artwork is not an easy task. And I think when you're not an art student, sometimes you don't understand how hard it is to make a work of art that is visually pleasing and expresses an idea and uses research. So I think that was the hardest part to me, is just like, I just had to keep pushing the students. And we just came out of COVID, right? So they weren't used to being in class and working so hard and working together and being around each other. So there already was this sort of like, we have been just working online and now we are tasked to do all this work all of a sudden. I do feel like we created this amazing sense of community in our class. Like that particular class, it was by the end, I mean, we had a party, we had like, everybody was so close to each other because of the fact that we just sort of came out of COVID.
Do we have time for more questions or do we need to wrap up?
I think we have time, maybe one more question, Helene.
Okay. Amber and Anna, if you were able to have the opportunity to do a similar collaborative project on social justice or on a community-based project, what would you do differently and improve on because of what you've learned this semester? And actually, the same question could apply to Dr. Pilato. I assume this is the first time you've taught this particular course, at least. How would you do this differently if you did it again? If you would.
Let's start with you, Anna.
It's a difficult question. Now knowing how to collaborate and communicate with such a large project, I feel like that I would have better organization when it comes to my ideas and working on everybody else's ideas as well. Instead of having just, oh, here's this little square, having like a Dropbox or something set up. And also learning about how to do this in such a large event as well. And excuse me for a second. And I think just better organization for such a larger project. That's what I would say.
Thank you.
I guess for me, because that was I've taught community arts classes, mural classes, nothing like this, where we do the discussion board and we had so many projects. For me, I think that I thought I was very clear about expectations, but I think maybe in the first part of class being like, this is going to be a ton of work. If you don't want to do a ton of work, you probably should drop the class. So just sort of having that right away, like this is an elective for a lot of you. It's a special topics course. It met twice a week for 3 hours. So the students were committed to 6 hours a week worth of class time, plus homework and things. So that's a lot. And for an art student, they're used to that. For other students, they're not. I thought about not opening up my classes to other students in the future because of some of the ones that struggled that were in the different majors. But in the end, they all were very happy that I opened it up to them, and they were really glad to be part of it. So in the beginning, I almost thought I'll never do this with other than art students, right? And then towards the end, I thought I'll definitely do this with other than art students, because it made the art students think about things in different ways that they wouldn't have thought about. It made them think about how to express their ideas in a different way that could communicate something to people who aren't artists. And they just brought a different level to the work, which made us all question things in different ways. And it created a different type of atmosphere and conversation with having the communication majors in there and the theater majors. They were thinking about things differently. So I am going to add those people, and I'm about to teach murals. And I guess for me, we tried to cover so much: photography, collage, painting, drawing, and so this time I'm just doing one topic. So we'll do it the same way, but we'll just look at street art. So it'll be the same thing where we're investigating and we're researching and we're doing these things. And then we'll create a final mural at the end of the semester. So we'll spend the first part of the semester just doing research, coming up with ideas, and then we'll create a mural that we're actually going to paint for the class, and that'll be the collaborative piece. So there'll be individual design sessions. They design all the works themselves from our research. We'll do asset mapping about the site, about the place. We'll try to find out what we want to include, what people want to see, how we can, express something that the community actually wants, the ODU community, and then we'll put together a whole bunch of ideas. And then from there, we'll finalize it into one idea. So this has sort of helped me get there with these other projects. We also did yarn bombing, which was amazing. And the students really liked that at Brock Commons, and we did a bunch of stuff. So maybe I added too many projects, but they sort of all built off of each other. So we started with just stitching our masks with something that addressed a social justice issue, and they all had to make masks and stitch something on them that would confront an issue. And then from there, they learned to use yarn and do stuff with yarn. And then that was sort of like a big collaborative piece. And so there was elements that were by themselves and elements that were collaborative. For the mural class, I'm going to do a lot more individual work before we collaborate. So the final project is collaborative, but leading up to it is more individual, so that they don't have to collaborate on every single project, which is hard to organize, right? It's hard for them to get a hold of each other, to show up, stuff like that. So I'm excited I'd like to teach a class like this every semester for the rest of my career. It's my research as well, so that it allows me to be able to teach from my research base.
Thank you so much, all three of you. Thank you, audience, for joining us this morning. I've pasted in the chat the links so that you can check out the rest of the Arts in the Library's virtual festival website. We have stored presentations, we have virtual tours, we have performances, digital and physical exhibits, and more. The recordings of these talks will be available soon. Please join us again this afternoon at 1 p.m. for a final presentation, Discovering the Scores and Recordings of 21st Century Composers in the ODU Music Library with Elizabeth Hogue. That will be, okay, I'm sorry. Thank you so much for joining us, all of you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you so much.